Hello, everyone, and welcome to week 11. This week we are going to talk about elder abuse, and I created a short PowerPoint. I'm going to go over some of the highlights of the chapter. I do have the actual publisher PowerPoint available to you as well as this PowerPoint so that you have all of the information, but please make sure you read. I will not be covering everything, just the highlights. So this week we are covering chapter 10 of the Gosselin textbook, and this week is all about elder abuse. So as always, please make sure you read and take notes. Now, as you read, it's important to note that this topic is a fledgling topic in family violence. And it's probably not studied as much as some of the other topics in family violence. In fact, some of the statistics that we have are older adults are least likely to become victims of violent crimes, but they're more likely to be victims of property crimes. And you will see that property crimes typically provide the highest percentage of crimes against persons ages 65 and older. And so that's where we really kind of focus the elder abuse discussion on. Now, when we talk about elder abuse or older adult abuse, it's important to kind of know the age range that we are talking about. And it's very difficult because there's conflicting definitions of what is considered an older adult. Your book kind of talks about different things from AARP, kind of looking at it as 50 and older. The Bureau of Justice Statistics and the National Center for Elder Abuse kind of have some varying degrees of age, anywhere between 50 and 65. But typically, when we are talking about older adult abuse or elderly abuse, we are talking about the range from 60 to 65 and older. So the starting age is anywhere between 60 to 65 and then older than 65. Um, as I was talking about, this is a fledgling kind of area of study in family violence, and um, elder abuse is typically private. Um, and you would probably argue, well, Mr. Dean, most of like intimate partner violence and things like that it is private as well. But I would tell you that elder abuse, as you will learn, kind of what constitutes elder abuse, um, is very hidden. And that makes it difficult for us to kind of get exact numbers of individuals, especially since there's still that growing debate around the actual age uh, of onset of what we're looking at. So it's still a growing topic in this realm of study. There is a piece of legislation that you should know, and that is the Older Americans Act Amendment from 2006. And it defines elder abuse in terms of willful infliction of injury, unreasonable confinement, intimidation, or cruel punishment with the result of physical harm, pain, or mental anguish, or deprivation by a person, including a caregiver, of goods or services that are necessary to avoid physical harm, mental anguish, or mental illness. Now, you will see abuse is very similar to the legal definitions that we have talked about with child abuse, with intimate partner, but you will really kind of see this being parallel to child abuse. So you will see you will have your typical what we think of as abuses, but then you have neglect as well that kind of falls into um, into the abuse definition um, for elder abuse. Adult Protective Services, or APS, is an area that you will read about. This is the agency that is responsible for investigating reports of elder abuse. And these are service providers to older adults and people with disabilities who are in danger of being mistreated or neglected. All states have APS programs, and in most states, APS are first responders. However, I have linked the APS website for Georgia into this week's folio readings, and you will see that they are very explicitly um, and like meaningfully telling people we are not first responders. If you fear that someone is being abused or neglected, an older adult is being abused or neglected, you need to call 911 first. Um, APS has evolved over the years, especially in the state of Georgia. Um, and they really kind of are tasked with making sure that older adults who come to their attention are not victims of abuse, but um, they deal with adults, and so adults have free will, and adults have um, rights that they can tell APS to go away, and unless there is something explicitly out there, um, like that slaps APS in the face as far as like present danger, APS has to go away in a lot of instances. All right, you're going to read about the categories of elder abuse. And there are three main categories of elder abuse that you need to be familiar with. The first is family or domestic elder abuse. And this is mistreatment of someone who has a special relationship with the older adult. And most frequent offenders of family or domestic elder abuse is the child of the victim. And so this is where we see abuse by family members, close friends, close acquaintances, things like that. The next category of elder abuse is institutional elder abuse. And institutional elder abuse is abuse by facilities such as long term care facilities, nursing homes, or you're going to read of a new phenomenon known as residential care facilities. And these facilities may or may not be regulated by state and federal um, agencies. You'll learn that residential care facilities are not as strictly monitored and regulated as we would like them to be. So you see different levels of abuse kind of creeping into the institutional component of elder abuse. There are many reasons why institutional elder abuse occurs. Most frequently, it's staffing issues, and you see neglect happening um, with elder abuse in institutional facilities. You're also going to see a conversation in the reading about restraints and how um, there are only two scenarios where an elder should be restrained, and that's typically for medical reasons or kind of safety reasons. Restraint should never be utilized for punishment, and that's where we typically see some of those um, abuses happening with restraints. So pay attention to that conversation in your text. The final category of elder abuse is self neglect or self abuse. Now, self neglect is a category that is only in elder abuse. And because adults have free will and adults have privacy rights, self abuse is really kind of think about it in terms of the person not taking care of themselves. So the inability or failure of an older adult to adequately care for his or her own needs. So this may be failure to take medication as prescribed, failure to feed themselves, failure to bathe themselves. We see hoarding a lot in self neglect situations, um, unclean houses, things like that. All right, finally, we're going to talk about the forms of abuse. And your book goes into each one of these forms in detail, so please make sure you read. But forms of abuse are, are how the abuses occur. And so you're going to see these are very similar to forms that we've talked about in child abuse, but um, there are two main differences with elder abuse. So you have your physical abuse, you have your sexual abuse, you have your emotional or psychological abuse, and you have your neglect. And neglect can be either neglect by a caregiver or self neglect. But you also have abandonment as a form of abuse, which we saw abandonment in child abuse. But in elder abuse, we're really talking about the intentional and permanent desertion of an older adult at any place, or leaving the person without the means or ability to obtain necessary food, clothing, shelter, health care. um, a form of abuse that is specific with elder abuse is financial exploitation. And this is illegally taking, misusing, or concealment of funds, property, or assets of a vulnerable or older adult. So we talked about at the onset that property crimes are typically more prevalent with older adults and abuse later in life. And that's really our financial exploitation. So this would be like um, a child making their parents sign over power of attorney so the child has exclusive say the in all the financial dealings. So they get the check, they're the ones that kind of take care of that check and things like that. But really, they're abusing their right because they're taking the money from their parent and not giving their parent means. We also see, and I'm trying to look for it real quick in in the book, but you're going to see something called undue influence. And undue influence occurs when people use their role with older adults to exploit the trust, dependency, and fear of others. Undue influence is something that you need to pay attention to because we know that as people age, cognitive abilities typically decline. And we know with elder um, populations, their cognitive abilities may decline as they're getting older. And so we see undue influence kind of creeping in, and that um, really kind of manifesting with financial exploitation and things like that. So make sure you pay attention to the forms of abuse. There are different signs and different kind of um, what's the word I'm looking for? There's different signs and different indicators of each form of abuse that your book lays out that you need to be um, kind of familiar with. So, like some symptoms of neglect that you'll see are like withdrawal or denial of health services, untreated illnesses, lack of proper hygiene, things like that. Um, some signs of financial exploitation is the elder not having um, money, or once their check comes in, they start getting a lot of visits from the same person, things like that. So, all right, that is going to be your lecture for this week. Again, this PowerPoint and the publisher PowerPoint will be made available to you. I have put in Folio a video that I would like you to watch. It is an older video, but it is a really good video to kind of talk about the rising prevalence of elder abuse in the United States. And it kind of goes into some of these forms of abuse and some things that we've talked about. So, as always, I hope you all have a great week. If you need anything, feel free to reach out. Have a good week.